Hello, Kate, and welcome to the A.V. Korkor Foundation podcast. Uh,
Thank you so much for having me.
you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Uh, Before the session started, I shared with you how impressed I am with what you created and what you've been able to accomplish and the stories that you've been able to share through the podcasts and interviews that you have conducted. Let me start out by first asking you to tell me a little bit about who you are. Tell me about your story and tell me about how how the one girl revolution really began, first in your head and then in reality, to make it what it is today.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, my name is Kate Milligan. I live in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm the founder of One Girl Revolution. And a little bit about my own background is I work in PR and media and lived in Washington, D.C. for multiple years. I did a master's degree in Dublin, Ireland in public affairs and political communication. So, it was kind of through my time in Ireland that I got interested in PR and media and moved to DC, thought I would just live there for a year. And I ended up living there for 7 years. And then in 2018, I moved back to Detroit. I wanted to be closer to my family. And it was kind of around that same time that I started recognizing that women's voices and their stories weren't often told in the media. And I started simultaneously finding these inspirational stories of women and girls who weren't trying to affect policy, who weren't running for political office, but just, or even starting nonprofit organizations. They weren't doing big things. They were doing big things in small ways. And it was so inspirational to me to see, these women that saw a need in their own community and started a little initiative to make a difference, whether it was feeding those in need, making coloring books for children in hospitals, like all these little stories. And I moved back to Detroit and I was actually reading a book about the city of Detroit. And I stumbled upon the Detroit's motto. I stumbled upon this line in the book where it talked about how on Detroit's flag there is this phrase, and it's in Latin. I never paid attention to it, although I had studied Latin in college. And the phrase is, "There is always hope, and it will rise from the ashes." And it was at that moment that I was like, I need to start something. I'm recognizing all of these stories. The media won't cover them. I was pitching these stories just for fun because I thought that they needed to be covered by the media and they weren't covering it. So I was like, all right, I'll start it. And so it really was from that phrase, because I think that all human beings, but yeah, I'm talking about women in particular, they've been through hell and back, and now they've risen from the ashes and they have hope for the future and they have hope that they can be the change that they want to see in the world. And so that's when I started One Girl Revolution, and it started as a podcast. And now it's grown into a multimedia nonprofit organization. So we have 243 episodes of the One Girl Revolution podcast, all different stories, all different ages. So women and girls, from a 5-year-old little girl that makes coloring books for children in hospitals up to a stay-at-home mom who puts her kids to bed at night in New Jersey and drives into New York City and serves those experiencing homelessness, up to grandmothers who are retired that saw a need in their community, whether it's feeding those who are experiencing homelessness or helping new mothers in their community to take care of their babies, all these different stories. And it's just continued to grow and evolve. And now we have 2 short documentaries on our YouTube page, so people can check those out. We got nominated for an Emmy, and then we
Brilliant.
try to utilize social media and media in all different ways, whether it's the podcast or documentaries, to really shine a light on these stories.
Yeah, that's incredible. I actually listened to several of the podcasts and I watched the documentaries.
Oh, thank you.
And I was, like I said, I was really impressed. And my question to you is that uh, where do you feel this is going to go? I mean, how far you want to grow? what is your really broader vision?
That's a great question. I think when I look back, we've been around for 6 years and we just celebrated our 6 year anniversary, which is incredible. And when I look back on the 6 years, it actually kind of blows my mind how much we've accomplished and that we have, told hundreds of stories. And so I think that in some ways, I hope that I'm surprised. I hope that the future of One Girl Revolution is bigger and bolder than I could even imagine. We're continuing the podcast. So every single week we have a new episode coming out. We have, a couple of events this year that we're going to be doing, but my hope, my bigger vision for One Girl Revolution is that it's a movement that, of course, we highlight these stories through the podcast, and I want to make more documentaries. So I have multiple documentaries in the works right now. And, but my bigger vision, my bigger hope is that it's a movement that reminds every single woman and girl, but also every single person of their value, their purpose, and the power that they have, that they hold within them to change the world through their lives. And so I hope that we can continue to do all of the things that we're doing with the podcast and highlighting these stories, but I hope that simultaneously it helps every single person that encounters our work, that encounters any of our media, that it helps them to see like, hey, I can make a difference through my life, and helps them to see that they have value. And I talk a lot, and if you probably heard me say this on the podcast about how each and every one of us is as unique as our fingerprints.
Oh, yeah.
And I think about that, Dr. Korkor, that if we really believed that, if each and every one of us like looked at our fingerprint and said, you know what, I was put here for a reason. I have a purpose. I have value. I matter in this world. And I'm the only one that can leave that imprint, the imprint of your fingerprint on this world, how differently we would live our lives. And I really try to remind myself of that every single day, and I think One Girl Revolution obviously is a representative of that. I think that it was placed on my heart for a reason. And I just started putting one foot in front of the other to start One Girl Revolution. And now it's just kind of taken on a life of its own. We have so much going on. But I really hope that this movement encourages every single person to see their value and their purpose, and that they're as unique as their fingerprints.
Yeah, yeah, that's just amazing. Um, how do you access the women that are on your podcast? How do you reach out to them? How do you find them?
Yeah, so many different ways. So I started it, and I just started kind of identifying different stories that I would either see on social media, or sometimes people would send me stories. And now I feel like I stumble upon so many stories and get sent so many stories every single day. But a lot of the stories, I literally cold call them. I literally send an email and say, this is who I am. This is One Girl Revolution. This is what we believe, and we'd love to have you on the podcast. And the coolest thing to me is a lot of these women that we interview, they've either never told their story before. So that's one. They've never
Um,
been given a platform to share their story, or they've never been able to share their story in the way that we do. So I think what's great, and what's great about what you're doing with this podcast is, we're able to sit and have a conversation. And so, I get them to tell about their own story, their own journey, how they came up with the idea for the organization or the initiative that they're working on, and really create the space where they can tell the story, which is different than, I think podcasts are definitely having a moment right now. Everybody has a podcast, but also everybody wants to start one. And I think the greatest gift of podcasts is they can go, it's not just 30 seconds. They can go on for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or sometimes an hour. And while we try to keep our podcast episodes between like 30 minutes to an hour, because I feel like that's a good length of time where people can listen when they're driving from one place to another or cleaning their house. It's kind of
sure.
a good length for us, but we've definitely had episodes that go much, much longer, an hour and a half or almost 2 hours. I think I've had an episode like that because there's so much to cover, and it's just a great space for these women to tell their stories. And then also to promote the work that they're doing. We encourage, on every single episode, I ask how people can get involved in these organizations, because I'm a firm believer that every single person wants to make a difference in the world. They want to they want to be reminded of their value and their purpose. And sometimes it's in serving other people, working with other people, that we're reminded of that, like that we matter. And so I ask on every single episode how people can get involved in their work and how they can support it, whether it's giving of their time, giving of their talent, or giving of their treasure, right? Sometimes we don't have money to donate to something, but we could give of our time. We could give an hour once a month to help someone, or we could give of our talent if you're a graphic designer, or you or a dancer or a photographer, right? We can all do something. And so that's a long-winded way of saying a lot of these stories. I literally reach out to them on social media and say, this is who I am. I'd love to highlight your story. And it's cool because most of these women, most of our guests start out as a stranger, but by the end of it, we're friends and stay in touch. And it's been really beautiful to watch these women and girls continue on their path forward and continue to grow and evolve their missions.
I read this quote, which really left a great impression on me, is that there's two events in our life that are really greatly important, is when we are born and when we find out why.
Wow. That
You
just
know,
gave me chills. That's beautiful.
and I think that when we find out why we were born, is that what is it, the purpose of our existence? And I remember I faced that question. I've always been philanthropic in my life. I think from the time I was a little kid, if I had two quarters, one I can eat, buy a trinket with, and the other one I can give to somebody, I would give it to that. Make sure that I have enough to do both. And philanthropy has been a part of my life. But I remember when I decided to step down from my clinical practice, and I said, what is going to be my purpose here? Am I going to be playing golf for the next, X number of years? Or am I going to be, traveling the world in, that period of time? And then I realized that really, if I don't have a purpose in my life, I really don't have anything that representative of who I am. I think your comment about the fingerprint, that we all are unique and we all could offer something to this world, is really what drives me to establish the foundation and to end up having thousands of people follow me and listen to my story and attend a 550/50 event, or attend the conference, or share our share what we have on whether on our website or social media or whatever. There are so many people, and I've always felt that throughout my entire movement, if I could change the life of one person, I've done a good job. I mean, and I think the same applies to you. I mean, you think of what you've done and how many lives have you reached, and in my opinion, how many you've also influenced. I think you've done an amazing job doing that, and I want to congratulate you on accomplishing this. You know,
Thank you so much. No, it's so important. And I love that quote. I'm going to remember that forever because it's true. Like the 2 points in our life, the two moments in our life is when you're born and, when we find out why. I think that that's so powerful to think about. And I also in thinking about your story, and I think all of us have these chapters in life. My mom used to always say, you don't have to die to have many lives. And I think that our life, sometimes things happen in our lives that lead us to do other things, or even like, retiring from your clinical practice and then finding a new purpose in life. We're always becoming who we were created to be and constantly writing our story. And that's so important for us to be reminded of that, even when you retire, like it's just closing one chapter and moving on to the next. Or maybe we go through a really difficult chapter in life, right? And that's the thing that leads us to, and that's the thing that leads us to our bigger mission in life. And that's what I see through so many of these women that we interview. Sometimes they've been through really horrific things, and now they're able to help other people and be examples to all of us, like through their own stories.
yeah. You've done 243 interviews, and I managed to listen to 3 of your podcasts and watch the two documentary films that you have. It would take a lot of time for me to cover all of them.
Yes.
But I have a question for you. Of all those interviews that you've done, is there one that's in particular that still sticks in your head that left you deeply touched? And I'm sure each one of them, like you said, had a unique and special story. But is there one in particular that you, or maybe two or three, a handful of them that really left you with a sense that, oh, at all?
Yeah, I think that all of them, I feel like a proud mom where it's like, who's your favorite kid?
I
And
know.
um, I love them all. And I try to always be surprised, right? Like I do preparation before each interview, but I also like when I can just be surprised by something that the guest says, or I feel like I'm learning every single conversation that I have. I want to be a learner. I want to be curious, right? And get to know these individual women and girls. But two that come to mind that were very life-changing for me is one on the podcast. I had this girl, Ruby Kate Chitsey, and she's from Arkansas. And I had her on probably when she was maybe 12, 11 or 12. And when she was 9 years old, she was really struggling in school. She was bullied by other kids. She has the story that pretty much everybody I feel like has, where she was really kind of struggling and having a hard time. And her mom was a nurse at a local senior living facility. And Ruby, after school, started going with her mom because her mom would be like, oh, I need to drop a couple of things off. And Ruby started getting to know all of these elderly people. And it was just a little treat for them because they never often saw kids coming and hanging out. Well, then Ruby starts befriending all of them. And so she has her little buddies that she would go visit after school a couple of days a week. And then she started bringing a journal with her. And this is a forgotten about population, right? Seniors living in senior living facilities. A lot of times their families just put them there so they don't have to deal with them or don't come visit. And so it can be really lonely. And so here this kid is going around 9 years old and she starts interviewing them and asking them, if you could have three wishes, what would you wish for?
Mm,
And thinking that they were going to, say, I want $1 million, I want a Ferrari. No, they had very simple little things. So it was like, I love Coke in a glass bottle. When I was a little kid, they would tell her stories. When I was a little kid, I used to get Coke. I would save up my money and I would get Coke in a glass bottle. Or I love birthday cake Oreos, and I love the movie Dumbo. It reminds me of my mom, and I want to watch Dumbo. And this little girl started saving up her money. And every single week she would go back, she would interview them, ask for their three wishes, and then she would go back the next week and grant their wishes. Well, Ruby Kate Chitsey is, I think, 17 now. This girl is amazing. So for 8 years, she's been granting wishes. Three Wishes for Ruby's Residence is her organization. So this nonprofit that encourages kids and people of all ages to go and volunteer and grant wishes to their
mm,
local senior living facilities. And I think about Ruby all the time. She was somebody that I had on the podcast when she was so young, and now she's this vibrant 17-year-old, thinking about college and still serving people every single day. And she's such a reminder that no matter what age we are, we can all do something to help others. And so that's one that comes to mind. And I've actually had her on the podcast twice because I wanted to do a follow-up because she's just been like, she's just incredible.
so
And
she
then
does have a foundation called Three Wishes.
Three
Uh,
Wishes for Ruby's Residence. Yeah. So it's a
right.
nonprofit based in Arkansas, but they do work all around the world, and
Um,
they do work in their own community, but also encourage kids all around the world and
um,
other people to go, and we can all do something, right? Like there are senior living facilities everywhere, and like we can all do something to deliver pizzas or send cards for Valentine's Day or Christmas, like little things. And that's what I love so much about her story is she reminds us that we can all do something for people in our own communities, even for our neighbors, right? It doesn't have to be even a senior living facility. But if you know someone who might be lonely, I know during the pandemic they did, which is crazy that we're coming up on 5 years, when the whole world shut down, she was encouraging people to send cards to their neighbors and just people that might be lonely and need a little love. So I love that story. And then the other one that comes to mind was very life-changing for me is one of our documentaries. And I actually have covered it on the podcast in multiple ways, but The Girl Inside is our Emmy-nominated documentary. And we took a film crew into Cook County Jail, so the largest jail in the
Love that.
US.
I
And
watched that. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. And that was just like a big dream. And I remember when a friend of mine owns a production company, Rob, in Chicago, and he had said to me, "Hey, I love the podcast. If you ever come across a story that you feel like needs to be told on film, I know you don't have any funding. Let's figure it out and maybe we can do a collaboration." And that's how The Girl Inside came about. Actually, that's how both of our documentaries came about. And so I'm so grateful. But it took me 9 months to get clearance to go into Cook County Jail. And then even when we were going in that day, we didn't know who exactly was going to be in the room. So we knew that it was going to be an open invitation to all of Dr. Laura Biaggi's former students. So anybody could have showed up. And we finally knew, I think the day we were going in, that it was going to be 5 women. Didn't know exactly, didn't know their stories, didn't know if they were even going to be willing to talk. They knew that we were going to be filming. So obviously they were open to that. And that day was transformative for me in multiple ways. But the thing that comes to mind, and I ended up having one of those women on the podcast, and then we did a whole 10-part series on women in incarceration through The Girl Inside, because it was so eye-opening for me, of course, to spend time within Cook County Jail, but really to sit and have conversations with these women. And the thing that comes to mind is prior to that day, that would have been in November of 2019. Prior to that day, I had gotten some feedback from different people that were like, why do you use the word girl? I think that it should be woman, like it should be one woman revolution. And I just felt so convicted that it was supposed to be girl. And I never really knew why. And so I'm sitting in this room with the 5 women, and I start telling them kind of what we're hoping to accomplish that day. You know, we wanted to highlight Dr. Laura Biaggi's life-changing class, this storytelling class that she taught. But also I wanted their voices, these 5 women, I wanted their voices to be heard in whatever way they felt comfortable. And so I started telling them about how I started One Girl Revolution. And, you know, we really want to elevate the voices and stories of all women. And we want One Girl Revolution to be this movement, like I talked to you before about. We want it to be a movement that encourages every single person to see their value, their purpose, and the power that they have, even behind the walls of Cook County Jail, the power that they have to change the world. And Dr. Korkor, what was really mind-blowing to me was the one word that those women latched onto was girl. They went on and on about how it was a reminder to them about when they were a little girl, when they were little, before anything happened to them, before abuse happened, before other things happened in their lives that started etching away at who they were created to be. That word girl reminded them of who they were created to be. And that's what you see them kind of unfolding on the screen. I mean, they start kind of breaking open and telling these stories of their hopes and dreams. And it was in that moment that 2 things happened. One, it encouraged me in using the word girl, and it helped me to see the reasoning behind it was exactly what they experienced, which is I want to remind every single person of when they were born and when they were little, and like before things happened to them that made them feel insecure or less confident or got them to not chase their dreams, right? We all have those things that hold us back. And so I want One Girl Revolution to be that reminder of to each and every one of these women and girls of that little girl that they were created to be. And let's like go back and find her again and then tell that story. And then secondarily, it helped me to look at my own life. You had asked me before, about my story. And it was in that moment that I started reflecting on my own life as a little girl. And I had terrible eczema growing up. My skin was raw. I would itch my hair out. Um, I barely slept as a little kid, but I was this happy, vibrant, joyful little kid that my parents would always joke that I was either going to be the dictator of a small nation or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, because I would rein my siblings in, and like I was the little mom. I would tell them what to do and lead and guide them. And then when I went into school, similar to Ruby Kate Chitsey, similar to other people, so many other people, I started getting bullied in class, and I stopped talking in first grade and stopped raising my hand. I just wanted to be invisible. And so in that moment, when these women within Cook County Jail were talking about themselves as little girls, I had this epiphany moment where I was like, oh my gosh, that's the connecting point for why I started One Girl Revolution, why I care so deeply, right? The things that I experienced as a little kid where I felt marginalized, ignored, forgotten about. Those are the stories that I want to elevate. And of course, I'm talking to you now, I found my voice again. I found I didn't go through school, all of my school career that way. I found my voice again and found my power. But that was very transformative for me. These women talking about their journey as a little girl and reclaiming that little girl and reclaiming their lives again.
Yeah, that's incredible. These are two very powerful stories. I
Yeah.
love the documentary. I found it very, very touching. And it's interesting. One of the things I love to do is also photography. And there was a time when I really wanted to go and photograph women in the jail. And I mean, it's still something in the back of my mind. I remember seeing a photograph by an award-winning photographer of a photographing pregnant women in the jail before and after they had their babies. And it was incredibly touching to see them having their babies and then now holding them while they're in jail, whether they're breastfeeding them or caring for them. I mean, there's just so much unfairness in our world. And, you know, now going through the podcast and the individuals that you've done, I was struck by a few. The one that you did with a physician with Parkinsonism, and what she has done to really bring awareness to this. And, it reminded me of the fact that I had panic disorders for 30 years before I announced it. It's always a challenge when you're a physician and share that you have some medical issues that of course when it comes to mental health, the stigma is just and for her, she was a surgeon, and that would be significantly compromising her career. And the one that you did with a woman who uh, was about suicide. She's the one that stops. And I think this program that I have often referred to, but I didn't realize that she's the one who founded it. And I thought that was incredible. Now, what about mental health in general? Have you come across, other than the program you did on suicide, any other interviews that you can comment on that relates to mental health?
Yeah, we've done a lot on mental health. And even I think that there is, maybe not in every episode, but I do believe that there is a thread that kind of goes through all of our different
Right,
programming,
right.
right? Because it's
It's
we're
there.
all dealing with it, right?
Of
We're all
course, of
dealing with
course.
different
Yeah.
different things. And I think that in some ways our culture and our world is more open to having conversations about mental health. But on the flip side, there still is so much of a stigma, and we can be so judgmental of who we think people are, right? And like what we think that their struggles are. And I know that I deal with that even in my own family and my own friend groups too, where we might see somebody who is struggling and people might write it off as like an addict, oh, it's addiction, or oh, it's this or
Oh,
it's
yeah.
that, instead of actually getting to the root cause. And um so I think that mental health is always a part of the conversations in different ways that we've done. Suicide personally to me is a very personal topic to me. My grandfather died by suicide, and so it's something that I've kind of always carried with me. And so I get connected to, that's something that I'm always looking for stories that kind of have those conversations about suicide. We recently had this amazing girl on who started something called the Sunflower Project. And she's based here in Michigan, and she fundraised. She is a survivor of suicide, 5 attempts, and she started a nonprofit called the Sunflower Project, and they fundraise. They do, all of their funding goes to help other people, no matter their age, no matter who they are, help them get the support and help that they need. Because she recognized that in the mental health space, a lot of times people, the help that they need is not always accessible. We also recently covered a organization called Got Grief House.
Oh, yes,
And yeah, and so they do free grief groups. So I think that that's an important thing, important aspect,
absolutely.
because
Yeah,
grief is something we all
absolutely.
experience, right?
Yes,
Whether
yeah.
we, and I do have friends that are like, I've never been to a funeral in my life. I'm like, well, buckle up, because at some point you're going to go, like, you're going to have something, a death of a family member, a death of a friend. I come from a big Irish family. And so we're very open, a big Irish Catholic family. So we're very
Mm.
open about, we've, even from a young age, my mom was taking us to funerals, and it was a very normal part of life. And even the struggles and the grief that we all experience in our family, we're very open and talk about it, which I think is very healthy. But not a lot of people have that experience. Not a lot of people know how to deal with their grief or deal with their struggles, or a lot of times in the mental health space too, people don't even know, where do I even begin, right? Like, who do I reach out to? And as much as things have become in the mental health space have become more accessible, I think that there is so much farther that we need to go. And yeah, we did another episode with this incredible girl, Katie Hardy, who founded 2 organizations, 6 Feet Over and then Suck It Suicide. And they build community around people that are grieving and people that are survivors of suicide, and just help normalize the conversation. And so I think we've done some bigger episodes, right, on these organizations. Stops, as you mentioned, is an incredible organization. And but we also have the thread of mental health discussions, I feel like, pretty much every episode, because everybody has something that they're going through. And I think that it's important for us to share our stories and our struggles and things that we've experienced in life, because it gives other people courage, it gives other people hope. And so that's a really important aspect of the work that we do at One Girl Revolution too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Uh, Now, just a personal question, when you're dealing with those stories day in and day out, how do you de-stress? How do you, uh, I mean, I get in my running shoes and go outside or go on the treadmill or do, something physical, because for me, that's how I dealt with my anxiety or stress. And how do you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's important for all of us to find our thing, right? We all
Right.
have something that, when you're going through something difficult, or you're on the conveyor belt and it's going faster and faster. I feel like all of us,
Right.
in life, we can be on this conveyor belt, or even like grief and difficulties. I know my family personally, we've gone through a lot of grief over the past couple of years, and it can feel suffocating, right? There are things in life, or chapters of life, that can feel suffocating. And so I think everybody has different ways to de-stress. For me, it's going outside, getting fresh air, going for a walk, putting my feet in the grass and walking, not right now because it's so cold, but in the summer, just like sitting in the grass or laying in the grass, and just kind of reconnecting with nature, going to the gym, doing something active, going to see something beautiful. So I love the Detroit Institute of Art, and just walking around there and getting a coffee. or even something as simple as that, going to a coffee shop that I love and not turning my phone off or leaving it in my car, and just going and reconnecting with myself and having a moment just to like breathe and be present. And also writing. So I'm not a big journaler. I'm not somebody who sits down every single day and is like, oh, let me write things down. I wish that I was. But I do have this beautiful journal, a Shino from Shinola,
Mhm.
and I keep that with me most of the time. And when I have thoughts or ideas or and a lot of it is really positive dreams, right? Things that I like am excited for, or things that I want to do, a summer bucket list, for instance. Sitting down and like writing those things down, I think there's something so therapeutic about that.
Mm. That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's hard to believe over 30 minutes have passed by.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I could
And,
talk to you all day.
and the only thing I would say to you is that keep it going. I really, really, I can't tell you how impressed I am by what you've done and what you're, I know, able to continue to do moving forward. And now having met you and realizing that the amount of inspiration that stands behind all of those stories. So please keep recording those stories and keep sharing them with us because they're important. I know they're important to you, but they're really important to the world and to all of us. I'm like many have been touched by several, and I know that you're making a difference.
Thank you
So
so much. Well, it's people like you that are helping us amplify these stories even more and these resources, right? I think that that's another thing is, even in the mental health spaces is elevating these organizations, but also the resources that they provide because we all can be beneficiaries or beneficiaries of the work that they're doing, but also to get involved and share the work that they're doing. So I'm so grateful for all that you do, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share more about One Girl Revolution.
yeah, thank you so much, Katie. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it,
Oh,
and good
thank
luck.
you. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you bet.